I welcome you all to my YouTube channel. In today's class, we'll be studying with pollen grains. Okay, this pollen grain structure you people can see more oftenly in hibiscus. In all flowers, you people will be seeing pollen grains, which are going to bear the stamens. Okay, more commonly, whenever you are going to touch the hibiscus flower, you are going to get yellowish powderish in nature. Those are nothing but pollen grains. Okay, we'll start. The pollen grains represent the male gametophytes. See, I am not going to call pollen grain as a male gamete. Here I am going to call it as a male gametophyte. Okay, see friends, gametophyte means this gametophyte is going to produce gametes in future. So we will be calling pollen grain as gametophyte, which is going to produce gametes. Okay. So whenever you are going to observe the pollen grain in the microscope, you are going to find very beautiful textures on the pollen grain. In this fashion, you people will be able to see the structure of the pollen grains in the microscope. Okay, you will be amazed to see such a variety architecture on the pollen grain, size and shapes, everything, color, design, everything will be varying on each of the pollen grain. One plant species and another plant species are going to differ with the architecture, size, everything. The pollen grain is going to differ from one plant to the another plant. Okay, so generally these pollen grains are measuring about 25 to 50 micrometers in diameter. In diameter they are about 25 to 50 micrometers. It has prominent two walls. When we are going to take this section of the pollen grain, you people are going to see it in this fashion. Okay, here they are having prominent two walls. Inner one we are going to call it as an intine, outer one we are going to call it an exine. Okay, exine is made up of sporopollenin, which is one of the most resistant organic material known. It means it is not been so easily degraded. It can't be easily degraded. Till now there is no enzyme called to degrade this sporopollenin. Okay, it can withstand, this sporopollenin can withstand higher temperature, strong acid and alkalis. So only the pollen outer wall is made up of sporopollenin. So whenever it sheds out from the anther, it has to survive. It has to be viable at least for some extent, so that it can reach the female stigma and it can pollinate it. You people are getting, sake of that it is having the sporopollenin. Okay. So pollen grains are having exine as a prominent aperture. Here called germ pores, where the sporopollenin is absent. It means the sporopollenin is not even throughout. It is not distributed evenly. Pollen grain in sutlanu enilla sporopollenin illa. Okay, at some places there is absence of this sporopollenin. At that places what happens, there the deposition is lesser, so very little amount, it appears to be thinner. That wall appears to be thinner, and that region we are going to call it as a germ pore, where the sporopollenin is absent. Okay, the pollen grains are well preserved as fossils because of the presence of sporopollenin. See, because of presence of sporopollenin, as it is not going to be degraded by any enzyme, we can also store these pollen grains as fossils. The exine exhibits a fascinating array patterns and designs. Depending upon the structure of pollen grain also, there are some plants which has been classified. It is more useful in case of taxonomy, in order to study the plants at the species level. And next, coming to the inner layer is intine. Okay, it is continuous, it is not interrupted. We are going to see the inner layer of the pollen grain. It is continuous. It is not like the less deposition, more deposition. Okay, here we are not going to see any kind of sporopollenin in the inner layer. Here we are going to see cellulose and pectin in the inner layer. The cytoplasm of the pollen grain is surrounded by the plasma membrane. See, this is a cytoplasm of the pollen grain and this is the plasma membrane. when the pollen grain is mature, it contains two cells, vegetative cell and a generative cell. So when pollen grain is mature, what happens is here it is going to show a larger vegetative cell and smaller generative cell. Now for this pollen grain, we are going to call it as a two-celled stage. The vegetative cell is bigger and has abundant food reserve and large irregularly shaped nucleus. See, very large nucleus we are having, large amount of cytoplasm, large amount of food material is present in the vegetative cell. The generative cell, see, this is generative cell, is small and floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell. See, it is the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell, and this is a generative cell, a small generative cell which floats in this vegetative cell. It is a spindle shaped with a dense cytoplasm and a nucleus. In over 60% of angiosperms, pollen grains are shed at two-celled stage. Okay, you people are getting what you understood now? See, pollen grain is having one vegetative cell and one generative cell. Two cells are present. Okay, if the pollen grains at this stage are dehisced from the anther, we are going to call it as a two-celled stage. Okay, that they are explaining here. Over 60% of all angiosperm, all flowering plants are going to shed these pollen grains at two-celled stage. Okay. The remaining species, the generative cell divides mitotically to give rise to two male gametes before pollen grains are shed, and now they are shed at three-celled stage. It means that about 40% of the angiosperms are going to shed at three-celled stage. It means even this generative cell is going to divide again and it becomes 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3, three-celled stage. So about 40% of the angiosperm plants are going to shed the pollen grain in three-celled stage. So friends, pollen grains of many species cause severe allergies. Some people are having allergies, okay. It might be asthma, bronchitis, etc. And for example, we can see the parthenium which is present over household areas or everywhere. The parthenium present, it is more allergic. Pollen grains are more allergic. They start to sneeze, they start to cough, okay. So they are going to cause severe allergies for some people who are more allergic in response. It's not only that pollen grain is going to cause allergy. Some pollen grains are rich in nutrients. So there are tablets as a food supplement in Western countries where large number of pollen products are used as a tablets or syrups, and they are utilizing the pollen bee tablet. In this fashion they are helpful. Okay, now coming to actual concept. Once the pollens are shed, the pollen grains have to land on the stigma. If in case the pollen as well as stigma are very close to each other, there is no worries, so that it can reach stigma very easily. But if they are unisexual flowers, or it might be in conditions such as dioecious condition, it means that dioecious means one plant is going to produce male flower and another plant is going to produce female flower. Okay, in such cases what happens, the pollen grains which are shed now, they have to reach what called stigma before they lose viability. Viability means the vital nature of life. If when we are going to call the life is present in an organism, so that is called as viability. Okay, they should reach the stigma within they are viable. In the viable period only they have to reach the stigma. The period for which the pollen grain remains viable is highly variable. See, pollen grains remain viable is variable from one species of plant to the another species. For some species it might be 30 minutes, or for some species it might be years together, okay, or months together. Rosaceae, Leguminosae and Solanaceae. Solanaceae flower I had brought for you people just now, I have shown you. So these all are Solanaceae, okay. Okay, you may have heard of storing semen, sperms of many animals including humans for artificial insemination is possible to store pollen grains of large number of species for a years in liquid nitrogen, that is 196 degrees centigrade. See, I told you earlier that pollen grains are having very hard outer wall called sporopollenin. It doesn't mean that even though if it is having hard wall, within its viability only we have to preserve such kind of pollen grains. Okay, when we are preserving at 196 degrees centigrade in liquid nitrogen, we can take it out whenever they are needed and we can pollinate them on the female plants or the female flowers on the stigma. It can be also seen in the human who are lacking the lesser sperm count, or who are not genetically active in order to have the successful reproductive rates. In that case, human beings, there is artificial insemination. It means there are a sperm donor, from them the sperms are collected and stored in the liquid nitrogen, okay, where they can be utilized for the sexual mode of reproduction in future cases. In next class we'll be dealing with pistil and megasporangium. Okay, thank you friends.